I see somebody with a hand raised. Do you mind throwing your question into the chat? Okay, I see a few people still trickling in, but I'm going to get started with housekeeping. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third module for the CCI Clearance Preparedness Program. This is just a note, and I say this every time because I keep having mistakes made with this, but please sign into the Zoom modules with your first and last name. There might be someone else with the same name as you, and we want to ensure you receive attendance credit. For example, I have two Jonathan, and I don't know who to give credit to for the last module. So unfortunately, Jonathan may or may not receive a badge when that happens, unless they complete all 8 to 10 modules. But if I don't have their last name, then I don't know who to give it to. I also have 4 other individuals who never registered. I'm assuming a friend sent them the link. They will also not receive a badge because I don't have their emails and they did not complete the registration process. So if you're giving out this link and your friend thinks that they're going to get a badge from completing this, they will not. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but they will not receive one. So having said that, we take attendance every single time. Zoom webinar documents the date and duration of your stay on the module. You do not need to email me after the module to tell me that you attended. If you're having Zoom issues, I can't help you, so please contact your institution's IT department. However, you will not receive credit if you call in and you are identified with a phone number instead of your first and last name. I will try and message the group if I see that to identify you, but I can't provide attendance credit unless I know who the participants of the module are. If you ever have a question regarding your attendance, please contact me. I'm always happy to help. Lastly, students will only receive a digital badge certificate if they complete 8 to all 10 modules. You have all received calendar holds now for the remaining modules. The next module will be May 1st from 1 to 2 p.m. And I will now turn this over to Dr. Eric Berger to get started on today's module. Thank you all.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Kendall. So today we're going to talk about the rules and regulations and directives that are governing the clearance process. This is probably the one, get some coffee because this one is kind of a slog. And I promise we will deal with the clearance catch-22, that you need a clearance to get a job, but you need a job to get a clearance. And so how do you break that cycle? So, just to recap, we talked about where you can work inside and outside of government with a clearance. And towards the end of the program, not today, but the end of the series, we'll have people from both government and industry talking about the cool stuff that they're doing. I actually have one person saying that they can't hear sound. I'm just wondering if that's that individual, or Kendall, do you hear me?
I hear you. If you have
Okay.
a second monitor, it might be coming out of your second monitor. So again, we can't help with IT issues. So please, unfortunately, you might have to work that on your own or call your IT for your institution.
Great. So back to the program here. So we gave a broad overview of the clearance process. And the last time, although we didn't advertise it that way, we were kind of walking through the SF-86. And today we're going to kind of do that a little bit deeper. Again, a reminder, people are using the Q&A box, but if you have any questions, just feel free to type away, and hopefully I'll be able to get to them. One huge caveat, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not giving legal advice, and some of the things that deal with getting a clearance, you do need legal advice. So I'm not giving legal advice. So where does all of this clearance stuff come from? And it's from the law, it's from executive orders, presidential directives, and regulations. There was an issue in the past where different agencies basically treated people differently. The president, this is about 40, 50 years ago, said, we really need to treat everyone the same. And then just only about 15 years ago, clearances became portable, meaning if you got cleared by one agency, basically the next agency had to accept that you had that level of clearance. Didn't necessarily mean you automatically got to access classified material, but like they didn't need to start a whole nother investigation all over again. So and also, yes, part of everyone treated the same, and I'll talk to this a little bit later. But if you're coming from an underappreciated community, that can't be used against you. Again, with all the fair labor laws and all that, the idea is that we're not looking to get, like if you look at the CIA from at the time of its inception, rich white men who went to Yale. They're looking for a much broader applicant pool. So a lot of the clearance process revolves around public trust. So going back to the 1950s, there was an executive order that said, if you're going to work for the government, and again, this is working anywhere in the government. When we talked about different levels of clearances, pretty much everyone needs to be in a position to hold the public's trust. And so we define it. What does it mean? It's that you're reliable, trustworthy, of good conduct and character, and unswerving loyalty to the United States. And by the way, if you go through this and either you don't find an interesting cleared job, or there's like a thing that's holding you back from that, but you can still work for the government. Sometimes a public trust investigation is literally an investigation, but there are a lot of jobs that you don't really need a full investigation, but they may still do some background checking. Everyone treated equally. So again, this is in the executive order. It's our tradition that all persons receive fair, impartial, and equitable treatment. So everyone's treated the same. If you are not a white, rich male graduating from Yale, you should still have as much right and ability to work in the intelligence community as someone who does have all those characteristics. That said, it is still a privilege. You don't have a right to work in a cleared position, but you should be able on equal footing to apply for those jobs. And that last bolded part, that basically we're going to have consistent rules that everyone applies. We're going to talk about this. In fact, we're going to talk about it now. You're investigated as appropriate. If you are applying for a job to be a letter carrier, that is actually public trust, right? We're not, we don't want letter carriers to open people's mail. But it's not quite the same trust as if you are dealing with our nuclear secrets. So we want to investigate everyone as appropriate. That it has to do with the degree of the adverse effect if we hire someone that does then eventually breach the public trust. Now, again, tying this back to the SF-86, the interview for clearance. This is why they ask for your employment records and they ask for your police records. Again, clearly, if you have a long arrest record, your fingerprints show up. Uh, uh, you know, Probably less likely to be trustworthy. Again, if you have a record, that doesn't mean you can't get cleared, but then we're going to be looking at how long ago it was, what it was, where are you at today? The flip side is, it's as detailed as needed. That both means not too intrusive if you're going for like a secret clearance, or incredibly intrusive if you're going for a TSSCI. So for example, that's where you get these full field investigations. You have the FBI literally knocking on the doors of your neighbors, talking to your roommates, maybe going to your employers. Now, addressing the catch-22. If you have to have a clearance to get a cleared job, and the only way to get a clearance is to have a job that requires a clearance, how do you get it? Well, one way is to get an interim clearance. And so agencies are allowed to hire someone and basically get them an interim clearance. For those of you who are like undergraduates at four-year institutions, you may be able to get an internship in the intelligence community or DoD or with a contractor, and you might be able to get an interim secret clearance in just a few weeks. And the other thing is, these field investigations can take a long time. So again, depending on the sensitivity of the position, the kinds of information that you'll have access to will determine whether or not you can work right away, or quite often, especially with the defense contractors, maybe they'll have you work on some unclassified work while your clearance is in process. A little more about this when we get into what are called the seeds. Another issue that has actually a modern version of it, it's continuous scrutiny. It's not, oh, I got my clearance, now I can go party and do all sorts of risky behavior. You're always under review, and we've gone from continuous scrutiny to continuous review, where your credit's continuously monitored. As you recall from last month, do tell your security officer that you've been arrested, because the government will find out. It's public records. How deep they go, again, depends on how critical a position you're in. And basically, you need to stay good, because if there is an issue, you can be immediately suspended. And by the way, if you're honest about it, if you report in a timely manner, the answer might be, thanks for letting us know. Or, thanks for letting us know, we're going to have to, take you off this project. All the way through to, thanks for letting us know, we can't employ you right now. Now, imagine that compared to you don't report. not only are you getting fired, you could be prosecuted and you may be barred from federal employment. So, those are things to be mindful of. Again, these questions basically show up on the SF-86. It's like behavior, activities, or associations that show the individual is not reliable, trustworthy. So there are questions like, are you a member of a terrorist organization? Do you fund terrorist activities? Do you advocate for the forcible overthrow of the US government? That's where these questions come from. We say it over and over again, deliberate misrepresentations will get you in trouble. Much, much more trouble than saying, yeah, I had a troubled youth and now I'm, chosen a different path. The, number three, yeah, this one shows the 1950s nature of this executive order to the point that sexual perversion has now been taken out as an indicator of immoral conduct, because basically the definition in the 1950s would capture what today is considered a very stable marriage. Would in the 1950s, if it's same-sex marriage, would have been considered disqualifying. Number four is kind of a tricky one. Something that could cause your judgment or reliability to come into question. So, if you have a medical condition that includes psychosis, it's not quite likely that you would be able to get a clearance. Now, if you have a medical condition that could result in psychosis, but with medication and counseling, you still might be able to get a clearance. I know of a case right now that's being adjudicated where the individual, they visited a hospital for a mental condition, and it was mismarked as admitted, committed to the hospital. And they're right now fighting that. And hopefully they'll win that one. A question came in on and again, the defect in judgment or reliability. And the question was, what about multiple sclerosis? Multiple sclerosis may impact your ability to get around, but as long as it's not impairing your mental capabilities, in fact, you're in a protected, because of the ADA, you're in a protected category. You can't be rejected for a clearance because of, a physical issue that, again, doesn't affect your reliability or judgment. Now, again, clearly depends on the job. If it's a job that's on the front line in a war zone, that would be a different issue. That would not be the clearance issue. And then the last one is, and it is kind of an open one, that the individual might be subject to coercion. And we famously have issues or examples in Washington where someone is very, very explicit about having affairs and committing fraud and screwing the little guy. But they're so open about it, they're not subject to coercion from that. Whereas someone else who's, I'm a very upright, moral, even-keeled, heteronormal person, and yet their private life is a lot of adultery and sodomy and fraud, that person may be subject to coercion. So that's, kind of what the criteria is this the individual doing things that could subject to coercion? And again, that is, subject to the individual and to the kind of information they're having access to. There are some explicit guidelines, and again, you're going to get asked these, have you spied for another country? Another thing that's kind of new that we'll talk about, are you knowingly violating computer systems integrity? All of you are enrolled in Virginia institutions of higher education. They all have terms of service for you using the internet. Running a human trafficking service out of your dorm room will trip on some of these explicit guidelines. Bottom line is also, don't be stupid. So we have the example of Edward Snowden, upper right, Bradley at this time of the picture, now Chelsea Manning, Jack Teixeira in the bottom right there. One of the rules, no intentional unauthorized disclosure to anyone, which is prohibited by law. There are whistleblower rules and things like that. But any willful disregard of security regulations, that can cost you your clearance. And for all of these, well, two of these people, jail time, the other one probably eventually jail time. So let's talk about the access to classified information. Actually, a very interesting question came in, which at the rate we're going, the Supreme Court will figure out. And the question is, are the office of the President of the United States, senators and congressmen they are officers of the government, and are they subject to clearances? I'm actually going to kind of defer that, because certainly the question of the president is a literal issue right now. And like I said in the opening, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a Supreme Court justice. Senators and congressmen do get clearances, and sometimes they don't get clearances. And so, that's why there are closed committees and there are limitations to who can be on that closed committee. There is a SCIF, a secure meeting room at the Capitol, so that you can have these briefings without violating your clearance. And so, yes, if you're thinking about becoming a staffer, having a clearance can be very valuable to your member that you're serving. So now if we go to the different classification levels, because remember, I was talking about how the level of investigation deals with how, and it really comes down to how damaging it would be for that information to be disclosed. And so we have confidential information, which could cause damage to national security. We have secret, which is serious damage, and top secret, which is exceptionally grave damage. You can think of it as in soccer, football. There's a foul, which would be like a confidential. There's a yellow card secret and a red card top secret. You may have heard of other kinds of clearances. These are actually, or at least the first three are actually kind of tacked on to these three classification levels. There's you quite often will see TS-SCI, top secret sensitive compartmental information. TS is basically saying you have the background and are of such a character that you could be trusted to receive information that, if was disclosed, could cause exceptionally grave damage to national security. That's top secret. But then we have programs that are so sensitive. We have like an extra level of vetting, as well as ensuring that only the people who need to know really are the only people who get to know. So that's the SCI and SAP that you get not just read into, and you're like, when you get your top secret clearance, guess basically review what the laws are, review the regulations, sign a non-disclosure agreement. That's good for, basically however long your top secret lasts. But then you get pulled into a program that is sensitive, compartmentalized information. So you will get read into that program, and you will be instructed on any special restrictions that that program may have. And then clearly, when you're not on that program, you lose that access, even if your top secret clearance is still alive. There's a whole body of regulations around controlled unclassified information. This is things like if you are processing tax returns and you see a social security number, that is not going to cause grave damage if that gets leaked, but yet there's an obligation not to leak it. If you're working at a regulator and you receive cost information from a company in that industry, that is not classified, but it's controlled information that, the government has basically promised to keep it private. Obviously, there's unclassified, which is like none of the above. And then you may have heard, if you watch the movie Oppenheimer, they kept talking about whether or not he was eligible for a Q clearance, or whether or not he could keep his Q clearance. Basically, Q is roughly the same as top secret. L is roughly the same as secret. And if you do DOE, they'll brief you on that. But the other thing is, for the most part, agencies will interchange Q for TS and L for secret. Really depends on the agency and, of course, the program. So what happens, when you get your clearance? Does that mean you get to see all the top secret information in the country? And the answer is no, because there's 3 steps. First one is, are you eligible? That's what the clearance process is. Are you eligible for a secret clearance? Are you eligible for a top secret clearance? Are you eligible to receive compartmentalized information? The need to know. So just because you're eligible for the information doesn't mean you have a need to know. And if you don't have a need to know, you don't get access to the information, and that's kind of intuitive. If we're trying to limit access, why would you need to have access to something that you don't need? Basically, nothing good can come from that. And then the third step, the non-disclosure agreement, especially for the special access programs, the compartmentalized information, there may be special requirements on that. And again, it's a legally binding contract that goes on for your life. Continuous monitoring. So I, alluded to this. And, what does this mean? It means that the agency can, monitor your information. And by the way, it goes for 3 years after. So you finish a project, you're still covered by these regulations, and they can continue to monitor you for up to 3 years. And they get to look at your banking records. They get to look at your consumer reports and your travel. If you finish up a top secret project dealing with how to address Iranian attacks in the Red Sea, and then you start traveling to Tehran, that might raise a flag. Even though you don't have your clearance anymore, even though you're possibly not uh, uh, even working for that particular employer. Financial disclosure. So you are going to be asked, basically to sign a waiver saying that they can look at your finances. And likewise, you, you still have to declare if you're going someplace, all of your foreign travel. Let me see. Let me just let's see. We got the iPad stuff going. I am going to get to dual citizenship. We do have a question about guideline 4. Can you be more specific about which number 4 that is? And while that person is finding that, I'm going to just keep going. Reciprocity, I've said this a couple of times already. The agencies, this is one of the reasons why it's uniform rules, so that the different agencies can be confident that, if DOE says you can handle information that could be of severe consequence to the United States, then, if the DOE thinks that, then DOD, knows that you've gone through a similar background check. Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah. So the question was that issue I raised about the hospital admission being an error. It is literally right now being adjudicated. I can tell you that the person had to hire a lawyer. He's working for a great contractor, so they're helping pay for the lawyer. They are keeping him working on unclassified work. And really, his motivation, because you could say, well, what does he need the clearance for? He's working on tooling, software engineering tooling, and he really wants to know what the application is. He feels like, and his company, believes that he could do a much better job if he knew what the application was, but it's the application of these tools that requires the clearance. So it's still been going on. That process has taken a few months. He did have to, get the lawyer to write the letter. And I would strongly suggest, if you have the means, to have a lawyer do this. Don't try to do this yourself, or the company, have a lawyer. And basically they said, okay, well, since there was a mental health issue, we are going to need an evaluation from an independent mental health professional. So, he could not use his counselor. He had to go to a third party that was acceptable to the government. So you can't go to your cousin who's a psychiatrist, right? You have to go to someone that's approved by the government and at your own cost, have them do the evaluation. And then they gave that, individual about 6 weeks to file all of their paperwork, met that deadline. He has mentioned, wow, I had a deadline when I had to get all this in, but they don't have a deadline to give me an answer. So he's kind of back in limbo, waiting for the adjudication to complete. So, thank you for bringing that up. And I figured it was worth going in because people have in the past asked about drug use, which again, we're going to dive deep into next month. They've asked about bankruptcies. These are not, none of these things are black and white. They really depend on your facts and circumstances. And even if the initial adjudication is no, on reexamination, it could be yes. Now we'll get to dual citizenship. So, first of all, it is excruciatingly rare for a foreign national to get a clearance. I actually don't know. One of the advisors to the president in the last administration was not a US citizen. I believe he may have had a clearance. But again, that is someone in a compelling position. Uh, uh, and notice this, they have to be able to investigate the prior 10 years of that individual. And then basically, if there are any doubts, they're gonna default to no. And this is where we get kind of into the dual citizen thing, right? Only to employees who are United States citizens. Dual citizens are citizens of the United States. So that's the first part. But the second part is you're going to be looked very closely as to why are you a dual citizen? Are you a dual citizen because you are of Turkish or Israeli heritage? You went to Turkey or Israel for 6 months, and both of those countries basically say if you're of ethnically Turkish or Israeli, then you're a citizen. Like you don't have a choice. In fact, you're warned about it by the State Department because you may find yourself in the Turkish or Israeli military, and the US government basically says, well, there's nothing we can do because you are also a citizen of that other country. But the flip side is if you have applied for a second passport, that might call into question your loyalty to the United States. If you're a dual national because your parents like were British citizens, the UK has model kind of like the US, where it doesn't matter where you're born. If your parents are American, you're American. Well, if you're still holding on to that UK passport, why are you still holding on to that UK passport? So it's not impossible for someone with a dual citizenship to get a clearance. Depends on the facts and circumstances. In some agencies, that might be seen as a benefit. Again, it's not the 1950s anymore. So, we're not going to discriminate on homosexuality. We're not going to discriminate on LGBTQ. We're not going to discriminate if your grandparents illegally crossed the border and, you've been here for one or two, generations. And again, that mental health one, yes, you may have had a psychotic example. Actually, I won't use psychosis because that one is kind of a tough one. But you've suffered from depression, and you seek counseling, and you haven't had an issue. Just put it on the SF-86. In fact, look at the question carefully because again, they will ask not, have you ever seen a counselor? They ask specifically, have you had an issue which could impact your judgment? And that counseling can be a positive factor. They don't just say, oh, you saw a psychiatrist. No, it's, wow, you knew enough to get some help and you're okay now. And I can also say all the agencies today have employee assistantship programs. So, you can imagine some of these positions that require a clearance can be quite stressful. And so, they want people to succeed. So the access to kind of like a review. If you don't need a clearance, you don't get one. If you had a clearance and you don't need it anymore, you don't get to keep it. There is a time period where, you can't see anything classified, but your clearance is still, how should we say, good, so that you can go to another job, another position, and they don't have to do the whole clearance process from scratch. I think I talked through pretty comprehensively the Byzantine process for protests. But by the way, at the end of the day, if the agency head says no, after a clearance has been reviewed, denied clearance has been reviewed, then the answer is no. So speaking of seeds, let's talk about the security executive agent directives. First of all, the security executive agent is actually a person. It is the director of national intelligence, is the security executive agent, and the director of national intelligence, one of their jobs is to set policies for security for the United States. So questions on adjudication. These guidelines map almost exactly to the questions on the SF-86, like, and again, hold your questions to next month about drugs, but there are questions there about your involvement with drug use, drug manufacture, drug distribution. There are questions about criminal conduct. We've talked a bit about psychological conditions, handling protected information. Have you violated or really this is the use of information technology, have you violated terms of service? Outside activities, if you are a member of Hamas, probably not going to get a clearance. Are you having financial troubles, which really comes down to not are we looking for good bookkeepers? We're looking for people who can be coerced. We're looking for people who are in a lot of debt and a foreign government says, we'll pay off all your debt. In fact, we'll give you a nice stipend. That's what we're looking for with financial considerations. Part of that continuous monitoring is, wow, $100,000 just showed up in your bank account. Where did that come from? If the answer is Uncle Marty died and I didn't even know he had all this money and he gave me 100 grand, great. If it's, well, I can't really tell you, that's going to be a problem. This is something that's representative of the philosophy. It's not what's in the text. But if you lie, if you conceal, if you obfuscate on your SF-86, that's an indicator of not being trustworthy. If again, like I was saying, if you had like a psychological issue a long time ago and you dealt with it, and you were bankrupt a long time ago and you dealt with it, those things taken alone might not be a problem, but if you have a bunch of that, a bunch of misdemeanors, then we're going to start questioning, well, how good is your judgment? And do you have an issue with complying with rules? Clearly, if you're out partying with a criminal gang, that's not going to be good. There's a good SF-86 question that was just asked. I'm going to get to that at the end. This is going to be in my any other business. Mitigations. So, and this time I am quoting, if you forget something on your SF-86, as we talked about last month, the very first question you're going to be asked is there anything you want to tell me? And you'll say, yeah, I forgot whatever. I was actually kind of lucky. I just did a renewal and it went to Virginia Tech. And I was like, oh my goodness, I forgot a foreign contact. They rejected the submission so that I could then, redo it with it in there and it gets submitted. If I again go, oh, golly gee, there was someone I talked to like 15 years ago, which by the way, foreign contacts is like 7 to 10 years. So it wouldn't even need to be reported. But let's say that person just all of a sudden came back into my life. I can say, well, yeah, by the way, this person is there. So prompt good faith effort is what's they're looking for there. Now, again, this is another reason to see a lawyer. Because if a lawyer tells you, don't talk about this, or, it's their advice, that is okay. But, if then, either they go to that lawyer or they say, well, here's, better legal advice, do you then cooperate? Is it a minor offense? You did something a long time ago, you jaywalked, or, unique circumstances. We talked about this last time. You went to a party underage and you drank a beer. Uh, that is not necessarily casting doubt on your good judgment. Talked about this, you're addicted to sex. Again, government's going to be worried that a foreign power will feed that addiction. But you are like, yeah, I got this problem and I'm getting counseling for it. And I can demonstrate that I haven't had troubles with it for a while. Fine. Uh, Another thing is, yeah, there are cases where someone just doesn't like you and they say, uh, Fred is dealing with terrorists. Well, if they can't show that it happened or that person is known to invent issues, that's not going to be used against you. Uh, Likewise, and we had this last year where someone basically said their family was involved in criminal activities, but they've distanced themselves from their family. So you've got the association, needs to be reported, but it doesn't affect you, or you can show it doesn't affect you. That's a mitigation. Yeah, I'm gonna keep we got some good foreign stuff that I'm gonna bundle together in a minute. Deep dive on social media in July. So I really encourage you, if there's anyone you don't want to miss, that's the one. Actually, you don't want to miss any of these. But first and foremost, the government can and is likely to monitor your publicly visible social media. That's key, publicly visible. The Seed 5 clarified, because some agencies were saying, give us your Facebook password. That's kind of like coercion. So you are not required, and like not required doesn't mean wink, wink. You should report if someone is asking you for your Facebook password or Twitter password or something like that. They can't make you show your non-public posts to your friends and families. And one way to bypass privacy controls is like on Facebook, you can see friends of friends and posts of friends and stuff like that. And again, agencies were, wow, we can bypass the no password by saying, well, if you want a job with us, you have to like our site. Can't do that at all. Again, deep dive coming in July. How long is the clearance active? Well, first is continuous evaluation. So we do have periodic reinvestigation. I just mentioned, I just submitted my reinvestigation report for my clearance. And I believe I'm continuously evaluated. Now, I don't know if I'm going to have another investigation. I don't know if I'm going to have another interview, or maybe I'm like double down for getting a deep interview. You don't know. And again, remember part 5 of that executive order, if you don't need a clearance, you don't get to keep your clearance. I mentioned kind of interim clearances. This is another issue. Interim clearances where we've got to have somebody in this position now. And it's a national emergency. The other thing we've got are temporary clearances. So here, And again, we want everyone treated the same, so we have rules and guidelines. The first is, like if you want to work for, well, I had this with the FCC. I filled out my SF-86. I gave it to the FCC. FCC's security office reviewed it. And they gave it initially to another agency to adjudicate, and they were like, yeah, there's nothing really wacky on it. And likewise, they will verify, are you really a US citizen? They do a fingerprint check. They do a name check. They do an NCIC check. And the investigation has to be started. But the point is it needs to be started. It doesn't have to be completed, and that can get you a temporary clearance. And then, you get some weeks or months in the holding pattern. So this was all the content I had for today. In fact, I'm going to flash by this one. We'll come back to it. We're going to deal with questions now. And I'm going to answer one question before I get to all the foreign questions. And the question is, or, the statement, I don't have the greatest credit rating. Children and I are getting back on our feet due to a domestic violence issue, was homeless. Will that affect your clearance application? This is where facts and circumstances come to play. If you remember, in fact, I'll pull it back, the mitigations. This wasn't, or, I don't know the facts and circumstances of your case, but in general, it's not your fault. So that's a mitigating circumstance. Now, again, homeless and maybe even bankrupt, that's a thing, because, they do ask, where have you lived for the past 10 years? No empty spaces. So you'll have to put down, you're living in a homeless shelter or on the street or on friends' couches. So don't lie. But you would also, and again, I would probably advise, but again, ask your facility security officer, wherever you're applying for the job, they may encourage you to write a note, because again, you get to write notes, you get to put in comments to all the answers you give and say, yes, I was homeless, or yes, I'm in debt, or yes, my credit rating's poor. These are my facts and circumstances. Just from reading that, and especially if it's like a divorce and domestic violence and all that, that's all going to be in the court records. You might not even have to relive it. Hopefully, it sounds like it was a rough thing. Hopefully you won't have to relive it with an investigator. But also, we are talking about having access to secrets that could cause grave damage to the United States. So you might have to relive it. But again, hopefully not. Now there's a couple of good well, actually, again, how long is a temporary clearance? I don't remember. There is kind of a time limit on it, but I don't remember. And the idea is it's supposed to be longer than it will take for you to get your actual clearance, because actually, if it's taking many years, not unheard of for 18 months, 2 years, but if it's taking longer than that, then you kind of do have to wonder, are you ever going to get the full clearance? And by the way, you can't live on a temporary clearance forever. If it looked like you're not going to get a clearance, you lose your temporary clearance as well. So here's a good question. Does foreign contact include a dual citizen nail salon technician? And the answer here is no, but for a different reason. So if you have a housekeeper who is a foreign national, if nail salon person is in the process of getting their green card, your swim instructor for your kids is here on temporary work visa over the summer, that doesn't actually rise to foreign contact. I will address dual citizen. I've helped a friend of mine start a company, shameless self-promotion, Hybrid Watch, very high-end Swiss watch company. He is a dual US Russian Federation citizen. I report him as a foreign national. So you do need, so people that you have a close and continuing relationship with, you do need to report them if they are a dual citizen, because you are reporting on the second nationality. And it's kind of bizarre because it says, what national is this person? And the answer is they're a US citizen. Do they have a dual nationality? Yes, Russian Federation. So that's kind of the dual citizen question. And I would also say, you know, someone asked, what about if I have a family member who's got a foreign business partner? Again, that's not your close and continuing relationship. Again, you're going to have to decide for yourself. Don't say, well, Eric told me I didn't have to report when it was someone you should have reported. I am not a lawyer. I say that over and over again. Someone asked, you know, if you've been in the US for 10 years, is it possible for investigations to go further than that? The generic answer actually is yes, and it's on the SF-86. Some questions are, have you ever? So, you know, for those things, it'll go back more than 10 years. That's got nothing to do with you got your green card 10 years ago or you became a citizen 10 years ago. That applies to everybody. So it's not a thing about how long you've been here. It would be about the nature of the question. By the way, if you're a US citizen and you just moved back 2 years ago and they say, list all your neighbors for the past 10 years, yes, you need to list your neighbors in whatever country you had lived in. Someone is great. I love seeing this. I am currently filling out an SF-86. And again, I would encourage everyone to take a look at it. And it's asking for foreign activities. I have foreign bank accounts and foreign properties due to inheritance. Do I have to give all the details? And the answer, well, actually, I'll give you the answer is yes, and then I'll give you my answer. That is one of the have you evers. And the reason I know this is I owned a property in Brussels, Belgium, when I lived in Belgium. And I never lived in it. And I moved back. And while I was back in the States in 1990 or 1991 was when we sold it. I literally do not remember where the property was. I don't remember the address. I don't have any of the paperwork from the transactions. So I say, I owned a property, I disposed of it, and there's a box that says, I don't know where it is. So if you know you've got something, but you don't know where it is, which would actually be kind of weird, because that's very different than my case, facts and circumstance, 35 years ago. If it was 35 months ago, it would not be credible. I don't remember where it was. So for the person who asked this question, yeah, you do need to disclose everything. By the way, this is, you know, one of the things to remember. If you have more than $10,000 in a foreign bank account, I believe you're supposed to report that to the IRS. If you've neglected to do that, this might be your opportunity to tell the IRS. Because, you know, again, your tax returns can be looked at, and you don't want to incriminate yourself. And then again, you know, the person filled in, it's someplace remote with no address, you know, facts and circumstance. I guess you realistically can say, well, hopefully you can say, you know, what country it's in and where it's near. And again, you know, if it's in Canada, probably less of an issue than if it's in Iran or North Korea. You know, it's going to be a facts and circumstance thing. So with that, we are pretty much out of time, but I did want to toss up our what's coming up. As promised, next month, we're going to talk about drug use. And again, the subtitle is, but it's legal in my state. And this is something that's very difficult for a lot of people, that drug use is legal in many jurisdictions, but it is still illegal for the federal level. And there is even a seed dealing with marijuana CBD and other hemp products. So we are going to talk about that next week. So with that, thank you all. Kendall, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it. We'll see you May 1st from 1 to 2.